Welcome to the Power of Peacefulness podcast. We're all about bringing peace into your life. If you like this podcast, do me a favor, give it a thumbs up. And if you need some extra help, go ahead and download my free resource. You can find that at SharonMcLaughlinMD/workbook. It's a workbook all about peacefulness. So if you need some peace in your life, try the workbook. All right, let's get started. Hey, everybody. Today we have Dr. Sonny Miles with us. She does integrative medicine, which is all about a holistic approach to our health and also palliative care. So I'll speak a little about that. Dr. Miles, thank you for being here today. I appreciate it. You're taking time out of your day to talk to us about lightening the load.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Let's start off with your journey. How did you get into palliative care? It's a hard topic. To me, it means, I know it's comfort care. To me, it means end of life, although not necessarily always the case. But it's definitely a hard topic or a hard area for some people to go into. How did this speak to you that you wanted to specialize in this area?
During residency, I trained at UCSF, which has a very strong palliative care program, and I really appreciated the work of palliative care. I didn't really see myself there. I decided to do hospital medicine right after residency, and I went to Indian Health Services in Northwest New Mexico and worked as a hospitalist. And I just found that so often we were giving care to people and our expectations of the outcome didn't match their expectations. And I felt like it was really the conversation, honest and open conversations about what we can actually do and what people actually want. And so that's what spoke to me about going back and doing palliative care training is how do we sort of truth telling, like how do we have real conversations with people so that we're aligned in what we're trying to accomplish. And then after doing fellowship and practicing more, I think what really speaks to me now is by having difficult conversations earlier, the better. We can really give people the chance to choose how they live, right? Most of us keep death like very far away. And if we can sort of say what happens if this doesn't go well, then it really becomes clear what matters to us. And then we have the opportunity to make what matters happen. Whereas if we wait till the very, very end, which again, palliative care sometimes is pre-hospice, and hopefully it's much earlier so that it's a much richer focus on quality of life and meaning, then we really give people choices about how they spend their time and the opportunity to do what really matters and say what really matters and take care of things that matter before the end of our lives. So that's how I got here somehow.
No, it's very helpful. It's such a difficult time to lose somebody, right? And then to be going through that yourself, knowing that the end is near and that you have choices to make. So I'm thankful that you're doing this work to help others.
Thank you. I did want to speak to that it's hard. And I would say it is hard, but it is the most meaningful conversations. And it's what really enriches my own life. Because when I spend my days talking to people about what matters when time is short, it makes me live what matters, right? It makes me make different choices. So it is deep and meaningful and sometimes difficult, but such rich work and connection with people.
I want to take it to the caregiver for those who are caring for other people. In general, women, we help others. So let's talk about lightening our load. What are some suggestions there?
Yeah, I think we as women and as caregivers and as healers, we carry so much, and some of it we're aware of and some of it we're not even aware that we're carrying. And as I was preparing for our conversation, I was thinking about it both in like all the things we're juggling that are sort of easy to see, not necessarily easy to change, but easier to see. But there's also all the emotional, energetic pieces that aren't as easy to see. And I first started really thinking about this. I did a program at the Upaya Zen Center with Roshi Joan, and it was called Being with Dying. And in talking about caring for people who are dying, she said, it's not your suffering and you can't carry it. And I had been a hospitalist for 3 years already. And it was like this, like I am carrying the suffering of all of the people that I come into contact with. So simply starting to be aware of it and think about when it's actually my suffering and when it's someone else's suffering. For me, that was like the first step in lightening my load. It's not that easy. Like we do it without even thinking about it. And I had to also sit with like, well, then what does that mean? Because I think we feel like we're helping people when we take on their pain and suffering, but we really can't. We can't keep helping people if we become weighed down by all that we see and experience through the people that we're caring for. And so really, I think the challenge for me became like, how do I really show up and be present with someone else's suffering? But then how do I set it down so that I can go on to the next person? And certainly there are some things that are harder to set down than others, but really thinking about it helped me tremendously. When I was in fellowship, I had a really lovely acupuncturist that I went to frequently, and we were talking about this conversation, and she said that when she comes across a hard encounter with someone, that at the end of the visit, she'll say to herself, I give you back to you, and I give me back to me. And I just thought that was such a lovely intentional practice, but also the way that we are sort of taking pieces of other people's stories and internalizing them. And if we're not conscious about it, then we keep carrying it. And so it's really be starting to be aware of all of the things that we're sort of picking up and carrying and beginning to at least notice what's ours to carry and what isn't.
I love that. When your acupuncturist mentioned that quote, I really like it a lot. It's a good angle, a good thought for us.
Yeah.
I was talking to my therapist this morning and I said to her, like the word depleted comes to mind. I feel so depleted, and it is like
Yeah.
you give, and then you have to try to start taking back because I always say like the full cup, right? Like you can't pour from an empty cup. So how do I fill
Yeah.
myself up now?
Yeah. And I really noticed, I do somatic work with a craniosacral therapist. And when you're like working with different parts of my body, you can feel where different emotions come up. And I started to notice even just like scrolling on Facebook and the story, like the tragic stories or the hard things, like they stick if I'm not paying attention. And so really even starting to be aware of when I'm feeling an emotion and being like, that's not my story to carry, right? Because it does deplete us. It's like all these, we have access to so much information and so many people's stories, both as healthcare and caregivers, but also just because of social media and the news and all the things in our modern world. And so it's really benefits us to have some sort of conscious practice of like, that's not mine, and I'm not going to carry that.
I love it. So talk to us a little about the somatic exercises that you're doing for those that are not familiar with it.
The idea that our body holds a lot of stored trauma, stored emotion, and that so many of us are disconnected or disembodied frequently. So my therapist also does somatic psychotherapy. And really it's sometimes just going to a place, or if I'm feeling sad, it's then asking, where does that sadness, where do I feel it physically? Where is it living? And then exploring that, like, why is it there? What is it doing? Like, what is its role? Or sort of really connecting the physical body to also what our emotional bodies and trying to, you can work through both, right? You can do therapy and sort of go from your mind into the body, or like with my craniosacral work, we're starting with a body part and then saying like what's coming up. So I think that kind of bidirectionality, that you can access the wounds and the pain and the healings through very different ways.
And you'll have to explain what the craniosacral work is as well.
Craniosacral, I'm not an expert. I've just received a lot of it, but there's this idea that there's a rhythm to the cranial fluid that's flowing from our brain and our ventricles down our spine. And so craniosacral is a practice where they're very, very mild and gentle manipulations to open up that movement of fluid and the rhythm. And so it's laying on a table and having someone put their hands on you very, very gently. and really opening things up. But for me, in that practice also comes access to my body in a way that I don't often get as I'm running around.
Love it. Talk to us about some mantras or affirmations to intentionally let go. You had mentioned that. We spoke before the podcast, like I do with most of my
Yeah.
guests that I have on. So let's talk about that.
The acupuncturist, that mantra, I've used that very intentionally. I give you back to you and I give me back to me. I think mantra is whatever works for you. So if, one of the things I learned in residency in one of my integrative medicine rotations or talks was just even thinking about mindfulness every time we wash our hands, right? Which we do often, of like just taking that moment to pause and be aware of what we're actually doing. And then you can use it as a moment to say, like, I'm moving on to the next person, or I am well, or I am lightening my load. Whatever word or phrase really resonates and has meaning to you, that's the mantra to use. So you can borrow one or you can come up with your own.
Let's talk a little about shamanic. Semantic.
Mhm.
I'm not that familiar with it. So I would
Uh-huh.
imagine some of my audience out there is not that familiar with it. Can you
Yeah.
go ahead and talk to us about that?
I have, so I right after COVID, I was leaving my job as an inpatient palliative care physician, and I really wanted to transition intentionally. I didn't want to just go from one job to the next without really making a very conscious and intentional transition. And so, in searching for someone to sort of help me, I found this wonderful shamanic teacher who's in Santa Barbara, California. And a lot of it is journeying, which is sort of, um, it's a form of guided meditation, but it's often working with animal guides or spirit guides. And you're really accessing an expanded state of consciousness of trying to access wisdom inside that isn't as easily accessible in our regular state of mind. And so most of it for me is guided journeying, and then being much more connected to the earth, to the seasons, coming up on solstice, thinking about how I'm gonna transition intentionally. So that's my experience with shamanic healing. There's certainly different traditions. Um, there's if you go into it more deeply, there's like the different worlds, like the underworld, the middle world, and the upper world. And people, their shamanic healers will journey with you to help you retrieve parts of yourself or to gain access to deeper healing. So there's a whole lot there, but my part is journey.
Love it. Any other tips for lightening the load for the women who are listening out there?
I think the first step is starting to become aware of all the things that we carry, potentially even making a list and just seeing it, but then also really noticing, and asking yourself, like, what am I carrying that's not mine? Sometimes when we ask ourselves questions, we actually have answers when we didn't realize it. And sometimes those answers will pop up later, but starting to ask yourself, like, what am I carrying that I don't need to carry or that isn't mine? From my shamanic work, one of the rituals that when something is really hard for me and I really need to let it go, like my shamanic teacher says that the weight of the things in the world are too heavy for us to carry, right? There's so much pain in our our whole world. And even just in the people that we come into contact with as caregivers. So we can't carry all of it. So a shamanic practice is you can take a rock or something and you can blow in the thing that you want to let go of, and then you can put it back on the earth in a particular place that you choose that feels like a good place to let go of it. But the idea being that, like, you're giving it to the earth or you're giving it back to nature, because nature can carry more than we as individuals can.
Sunny, for people that are listening out there who want to work with you, what type of services do you offer?
I have an integrative practice here in Colorado. I'm also beginning my coaching journey. So interested in beginning to work with people one-on-one or in group settings.
And you have a free resource on your website. Tell us about that.
I do. I really think that one of the key elements of healing and of living intentionally is being connected to ourselves. So I created a free guide to have a mini retreat at home to reconnect and to nourish ourselves and create a space for ourselves at home that heals us.
So where can they get that on your website, correct?
Yeah, on my website is healingwithintentionim.com. So the IM is for integrativemedicine.com.
Perfect.
You can also find it in the bio of Healing with Intention. I am on my Instagram account.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed talking with you.